What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your guys, Derek and Cody, with you as always, and we're continuing our positional breakdown, this time with the defensive ends. Before we hop into that, just want to say this episode is presented by Prize Picks. Be sure to visit the Prize Picks app today and use the code BTJ for a $100 deposit match when you sign up. Now, Cody, we did the last video on the defensive tackles. There's a lot of star power at the front of that roster, but this one, I'm going to really enjoy this one because this one not only has the firepower up front, but it has some really good, juicy tidbits in the back. There's actually a lot of people on this defensive end roster right now that I can see the Colts trying to keep, and I don't know how it's going to handle it. But we're going to go ahead and hop right into this here. We're going to start here with the guy that was the best defensive end for the Indianapolis Colts last year. That was Samson Ebukam, brought in free agency last year by over the 49ers and got, I believe it was a 3-year, I think it was either 24 or 27 million. I can't remember the exact amount. But Ebukam was brought in to be that that other option to whoever was going to be with Kwity Paye and now who we presume is going to be Latu Latu. But Ebukam came in last year, had a couple pretty good games. Cody, give me your thoughts on Ebukam and what he did last year for the Colts.
Yeah, massive improvement from who they had the year prior, Yannick Ngakoue, right? Because not only did he, beat his sack total, and gosh, he should have had 10, but he also can play some good run defense, right? And that's something that Yannick, as good as he could be getting after the passer, it wasn't close, right? So Samson definitely a player that is a more well-rounded guy in general, right? He can play the run, he can play the pass, he can do a little bit of everything, right? He's not an elite a guy at getting after the pass, but he can still create some pressure, man. He definitely has that ability to do so. And, while he definitely was like the number one guy, I mean, you're curious if you can get even a little bit more out of him this next season, right? If you can get near that 10, 11, 12 sacks, I think you feel really, really good about it. And so for me, I always viewed it as like Samson was a really good addition, but to me, he's kind of like a complimentary pass rusher, if you will, right? You still need that guy, which we'll talk about. But I think as a whole, though, being that number one guy, I think Samson did a pretty good job, all things considered, and certainly was an upgrade and probably one of the better free agent signings last year by Chris Ballard. And I thought he did really, really good things. So, yeah, definitely excited to see year 2 of Samson Ebukam and what he can provide off the edge for Indy. And I think he right now, as he stands right now, he is the best pass rusher on this team. And obviously we're going to have to see some other guys, but as it stands right now, the production last year and looking forward to this year, I'm excited to see him in year number 2, especially working with Charlie Partridge, who we're going to talk about, I'm sure, a lot. But just like how much more can you get out of him? I am just very intrigued by that.
Yeah, I mean, and especially you're right, with Partridge being in there, I think is definitely going to be a great thing because when we brought him over from the 49ers, it was kind of similar situations to DeForest Buckner, where DeForest Buckner was going off a little bit, but especially more than what Ebukam was at that stage. So that was why the Colts were willing to invest the draft capital to trade for him. But just to kind of get him into a situation where he could grow more as a player. And Ebukam went, I believe, from having 5 sacks in 2022, 2023 to now pretty much doubling his sack total the next year with 9.5 sacks here last year in 2023. So it's definitely a really awesome thing to see Ebukam really grow in that aspect and provide some really great minutes for the Indianapolis Colts last year. And you hope, like you said, with Partridge and hopefully with another name we're going to mention here later on, that he may be able to grow even more in that role. So hopefully we see more of him. We'll continue to talk about him, but we're going to go ahead and go with the other starting defensive end from last season, and that was Kwity Paye. Kwity Paye, who the Colts decided to pick up his 5th-year option. So not this year, but next year, Kwity Paye will remain on the roster and got a fully guaranteed $13 million to stay on the roster next year. So you know that Kwity Paye is going to remain on this team, Cody, at least until the 2026 offseason. Kwity Paye, 9 sacks last year. For the first time in his playing career, actually stayed healthy and didn't miss more than 2 games last year. So it was great to see that from the aspect of Kwity Paye, but a lot to still be desired, reportedly, from his pass rushing abilities. So talk to me about Kwity Paye and what he did in 2023.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about it. I think the biggest thing was him just staying on the field and being healthy, right? Because he had some issues in the past where he'd missed a good chunk of the games, right? It felt like he missed almost as many games as he played in his first couple seasons. So it was great to see him finally be able to be on the field for a good chunk of the season. And I'll say this, Kwity Paye is a really, really good run defender, like a really good run defender. He's probably one of the better defensive ends in the NFL at that, at stopping the run. So that definitely was a big, big thing for him. And you mentioned, him being on the roster for the next couple of years. But also there is that elephant in the room of the fact that he had 8.5, 9 sacks. But when you dive a little deeper and look at his pressure rate, it's abysmal. It was terrible last year, right? So he's just got to get better at all areas when it comes to getting after the passer, right? And that was one of those cases. We talk about stats never lie. Well, sometimes they do lie, and that was definitely one of those times when those stats did lie when it came to Kwity Paye, right? Even though you look at it, you're like, oh yeah, he had a breakout year. He didn't, though. When it came to he actually was worse at getting after the passer than he's been in his career so far, from a consistency, pass rush win rate, all that kind of stuff. So definitely think that if Kwity Paye can, maybe just add that other element of getting after the passer, I mean, he can turn into a pretty good investment, right? But as it stands right now, he hasn't lived up to that first round hype, Derek, when it comes to getting after the passer. Now, run, yes, of course. And maybe there are packages where, Indy does just have him in there for, the run stopping and they take him off on third down. But I don't know. I kind of look at that and I say, you're paying the guy over $13 million a year, guaranteed. He better be able to get after the quarterback, right? And he's a former first-round pick. So, I mean, you just got to see more out of Kwity this year. And, similar to what we talked about, and we're going to keep referencing it, but, is there more to tap into? Can he, find another gear? Can he find another pass rush move or two? Can he do some of that stuff? Because, he's going to have a great teacher in Partridge. He's going to have some other guys who definitely have some of that in their repertoire. So can he adopt some of that potentially? So I'm curious about that when it comes to him. But I'm kind of to the point, Derek, where I'm like, hey, if he's just a really good run defender, I guess I'll take it. But obviously you want to see him step it up when it comes to getting after the passer on a consistent basis. Because, I mean, Derek, last year he got benched for Taquan Lewis in those NASCAR, IndyCar packages on third down. And that just can't happen. That just can't happen. So he's got to definitely improve. I don't need him to be an elite pass rusher. I just need him to be a semi-competent pass rusher at this point on a consistent basis. And if he can do that, I'm all right with them paying him what they're paying him, because he makes up for it in stopping the run. But that's my biggest gripe with Kwity is just you got to be better at getting after the passer. You have the ability. You have the physical traits. Yeah. You just got to get better from that standpoint.
100% agree with you. 100%. The consistency is what it's all about. So we'll go ahead and move to the next player here, and that is the draft pick that the Colts invested this year, and that is Latu Latu, the 15th overall pick in the 2024 NFL Draft. Many who presume this could be the next great defensive end for the Indianapolis Colts, at least presuming he will be the starting defensive end for the Indianapolis Colts going into the end of this year. Cody, there was a lot to talk about with Latu Latu. Obviously, the last 2 years had 24 sacks at UCLA, had one of the best pressure rates, best pass rush win rates in college football recent history. As we talk about it, it had that neck injury in 2020, which medically retired him for a year, but then came back to UCLA ended up going to UCLA and then proceeded to have two of some of the best years of football that any defensive end has had in college over the last few years. So, I mean, talk to me, man, about Latu. The sky is the limit for this guy. We know. But what do we expect from Latu to begin this year?
Yeah, I think you're right. It'll kind of depend on what is his role early on, because we know he can get after the passer. I mean, he did it consistently at UCLA, right? And he was, putting up better production than some guys that went top 5 in previous drafts. So, I mean, there's a reason, Derek, why out of all the picks the Colts could have had on defense, they basically had the first overall pick on defense, and they chose him over guys like Dallas Turner, over whoever else you want to throw in there, right? Over Quinyon Mitchell, over Terrion Arnold, over all those guys. They determined that he was the best player on their board. And we know the Colts scout like nobody's business. Like, we know that if there's anything the Colts do well, is they are like in on guys, right? Like, they do their research. They are not just, we'll see. Like, they are very meticulous. But back to your question, when it comes to Latu, I think primarily he'll probably be a third down guy to start because, like we said, Kwity Paye, you just paid him over $13 million a year. I think he'll be the quote unquote starter right away. But I think Latu will be that third down guy. And I'm very intrigued with him and Ebukam on both sides, what that'll look like, right? I think it'll be some potentially really good stuff. But yeah, when it comes to that, I think if that's the case, I'm probably expecting him to have a pretty good impact right away because this is the guy that we've seen, Derek, players that put up similar stats in college to him in the past that come in and have an immediate impact on defense from the edge position, right? And I do think if it wasn't such a heavy run on, guys, Latu might have gone earlier. I really think that could have been a possibility. But as it stands right now, Latu first defensive player off the board for a good reason. And I think the Colts have a good opportunity here, Derek, to really have Latu right away come in on third down and make that impact. We were talking about, consistency. And if Latu's anything, he's very consistent at getting after the quarterback. Like, there's no inconsistency in his game. He's got that high motor, that high ability. And, I mean, I think it was very clear he was far and away the best pass rusher in this draft. So I'm very excited to see what he does here in year number 1. And I think even if he is just a third down guy right away, I mean, I think that's going to be very effective.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Summer's here, so that means NBA, football, all those types of stuff. It's not here right now. So we got the MLB and the WNBA to pass the time. I haven't really gotten a whole lot into the WNBA as of recently, but have had a couple things here. A lot of Asia Wilson props here that are really good that I'm very interested in making. So I would definitely keep an eye out for any of those. Shohei Ohtani for MLB props. Highly suggest you guys hit that over when it comes to Ohtani, when it comes to total bases. Anytime you can get a chance to get Ohtani, especially even with just a 1.5 or 2 total bases, definitely want to try and take advantage of those. Because all it takes is one good hit from Shohei Ohtani to get you above that number. So definitely would encourage you guys do that. Be sure to download the app today and use code BTJ for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app today and use code BTJ for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, it's sponsored by Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. I will say this. I actually saw a graphic the other day, Cody. I was on stream with Drake, and we were talking about, I think the Colts cast put up a graphic of the differences between Latu and Myles Garrett, who, again, in case anyone forgets, Myles Garrett was a first overall pick by the Cleveland Browns several years back. And he had more sacks in his final 2 years than Myles Garrett, had a better pass rush win rate than Myles Garrett did in his final 2 years, had about the same number of tackles for loss as Myles Garrett did. The only thing really Myles Garrett had better from a numbers perspective was the amount of forced fumbles that he occurred, which was actually 7, but Latu had 5, which is still relatively impressive, even in 2 seasons. So, again, level of competition, it's a little different over there in the Pac-12 than what it is with the SEC. I get it. But again, we talk about how, Myles Garrett, supposedly they always talk about how he didn't really have like the motor, or didn't really feel like, he really cared all that much about playing football, versus what this guy, we all know what he feels about playing in the NFL. So it's going to be a lot of fun to watch Latu this season. We're definitely going to keep eyes on him, but we're going to continue with this list, and we're going to talk about another guy that has continued to be sort of that mystical wonder, if you will, about whether or not he's tapped into all his potential or not. And that is defensive end Dio Dango, who was drafted in the 2021 draft with Quiddy, and last year also had 8.5 sacks for his year, and especially that one dominant performance against the New England Patriots, where he had 3 sacks. I believe it was 3 sacks in the first half against the New England Patriots. And Dio Dango makes his way into this list. And, he's a guy, Cody, that you and I talk about how he can be moved around a lot because of his versatility of playing both inside and outside in college, and due to the fact that of how, effective he is with his physical attributes. So talk to me about Dio Dango, what you saw from him and what you expect.
Yeah, I mean, similar to Quiddy, although I think he did a better job. I think there is some inconsistency at getting after the passer, no question about that. But, I mean, from just a physical ability, I mean, Dio's got it, man. You saw glimpses, especially in that New England game. Like, he can be a dominant force on that defensive line. Like, he can be absolutely dominant. He can take over games, right? You saw him do that. So you're just like, man, I mean, this kid's got not just good physical ability, he's got elite physical ability. I mean, no question about it. He's ginormous. He's long, he's tall, he's athletic. So, I mean, I think Dio definitely has all those, potential of being like one of the best defensive linemen in football. I know some people might laugh at that, but like all the traits Dio has are exactly what you're looking for. So, again, can you get more out of him? I think there's a lot more to tap into, honestly, than Quiddy when it comes to getting after the passer. I think he's just scratched the surface in a lot of ways. And remember, Quiddy had like a full season on him, basically, because, yep. I mean, remember, he basically was playing out there, playing catch-up the entirety of his rookie season because of that Achilles injury that he suffered in college. So, I mean, this kid's still coming into his own, and really, when you look at it, I mean, this is, I guess, technically only his 3rd full season. So I am very intrigued to see how Dio can take it up another notch, because I think he definitely showed a lot more of like, oh, they're not just coverage sacks. Like, he is just literally beating guys, and, he's winning. So Dio's got all the ability in the world, and I'm really intrigued to see where they play him, because he could go either way. I really do believe that. He could go, he can go in, he can go out, he can play a little bit of everything. So I don't know what he's going to do. I don't know where his role is going to be, but I mean, I think you can't keep this kid off the field because he is an absolute force.
Yep. Absolutely. We'll go ahead and move forward here. And another player that I know you especially have grown to really love and appreciate, maybe appreciate more than maybe some other people actually give him credit for, and that is Taquan Lewis. Taquan Lewis, who was drafted in, I believe it was the 2019 draft.
2018.
Okay, yeah, 2018. I figured it was right around that time. You're right. It was the year that the last year of Andrew Luck's tenure. So, Taquan Lewis, who has had a lot of injuries throughout his career, Cody. We talked about the first year or two the first 2 years of Taquan Lewis's career had a couple different injuries, and then in that 3rd year basically got told by Chris Ballard, hey man, like, I don't know if we're going to keep you around if you keep doing what you're doing. You're a healthy scratch even now at this point. So we need you to start like picking it up if you want to have any kind of significant role on this team. And from that point forward, has had several years where his sack numbers have been around 4 or 5 sacks, and then had a couple years where he's had some injuries, but has bounced back and really been a great rotational piece for the Indianapolis Colts because they can utilize him both inside and outside as well. So talk to me about Taquan Lewis. What do you expect from him this year?
I just have to say, I am so glad that the Colts gave Taquan another chance. Like, I am so glad that they did that because especially after you give him 2 prove-it deals back-to-back years, that raises some eyebrows. I mean, that definitely did when they did that, but give the Colts and Chris Ballard credit, it paid off. I mean, Taquan was so good last year, Derek. I'll throw out a couple stats to you from last season. So, amongst defensive ends who played at least 200 pass rushing snaps last season, Taquan Lewis had a 17.1 pass rush win rate, which is 15th in the NFL and the highest of any Colts player last year. So higher than DeForest Buckner, higher than Samson Ebukam. And there's a reason why he replaced Kwity Paye on third down because he was very good at getting after the passer last year. And I know he only had 4 sacks, but Derek, he didn't really have that many snaps. He was kind of lost in the shuffle a little bit with those defensive ends. So, I mean, I still think Taquan's got some juice, man. He's 29, so he's getting a little older, but he's still got a good couple of years ahead of him at least, if not a lot longer. And we know the Colts love Taquan Lewis, right? There's a reason they believed in him so hard. I don't know if I've seen the Colts believe in a player so much, despite all the injuries he faced, more than Taquan Lewis. But he has definitely proven that they are right. He is such a key piece. You're talking about just the inconsistencies sometime getting after the quarterback. Taquan Lewis was really darn consistent last year. So I really love what he did last year for Indianapolis, and I'm really excited to see kind of what he does this next year because this dude's got a lot of potential, Derek, even if he is technically, when you're talking about it, he's like the 4th defensive end we've talked about. I think he's going to have a role. I really think he's going to have a role because he earned his role last year with Indianapolis, and there's not enough people talking about him. People just act like he's just a guy. Taquan Lewis proved that he's more than just a guy. He is an underrated defensive lineman that we need to be talking about more.
Absolutely, and that's a great statistic. It's great that your backup, defensive end can have that kind of pass rush win rate. That's always a great thing to see. I always thought that there's some good things for him, so I'd love to see that, and I hope that we'll continue to keep talking about him. Let's talk about a few other names here, and it's a couple others that are draft picks or recent draft picks here. Isaiah Land is the 6th one here that we're going to talk about. Isaiah Land, who last year only played, I think, towards the end of the year, did have 1 sack last year for the Indianapolis Colts, but he was a guy that was strictly just a camp body until the end of the year when some injuries were coming in. So do we expect any kind of role with Isaiah Land this year?
I don't know if he's going to really have a role, to be honest with you, because you already have 4 defensive ends. I don't know. I am intrigued by Isaiah Land. I mean, he's definitely, I think he's got some interesting traits, right? I believe he was a draft pick last year, if I'm not mistaken. It was like a 6th-round pick or something from another team that the Indianapolis Colts signed. He's got some traits that you like. So, yeah, I don't know if he's going to have a role necessarily, but he is very intriguing. And I know there's some people who are pretty high on him with the Indianapolis Colts. So I'm not entirely sure how I feel about Isaiah Land, but, he's only entering year 2. He's only 24 years old. And you're right. He did show a little bit of potential last year with Indianapolis, despite not really seeing the field a whole lot. And, you kind of wonder, because there was who was it? Jacob Martin last year. He had some role a little bit on this defensive line. He didn't play a lot of snaps, but he had some. So is Isaiah Land kind of set for something like that type of role, where he comes in and he's a situational guy, or he just kind of comes in and release sometimes when some of your other guys need a break. That's kind of how I view it. Like, he's a kid with some upside, and some people are very high on him, like I said. So, yeah, I guess we'll see with him.
All right. Going forward here, we got 2 more players to discuss. Janard Avery, who was added to the roster last year in the offseason, just as it was mostly a camp body, but he came in and actually was putting together a really solid camp for a while, Cody, but then he was one of the first guys in camp that suffered injuries and ended up having, I don't even remember the injury at this point, but had a season-ending injury in the offseason. So do we expect Janard Avery to maybe climb his way up back into this roster a little bit, or do we think that with the additions that we don't think it's going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be in competition, certainly. I mean, you talked about it. A lot of people were commenting on how good he looked at camp last year. So I'm going to give him an outside shot, man, to compete for one of those final roster spots. I'm excited to kind of see what he could potentially do because, I mean, he's a guy that, don't forget, Derek, he actually has like a little bit, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I believe he has a little bit of production at the NFL level. His first season with Cleveland in 2018, he had 4.5 sacks. So, I mean, this not like nothing crazy, but like, I'm like, hey, he's shown that he can actually do a little bit getting after the quarterback. So I wouldn't say sleep on Isaiah. I wouldn't say sleep on a guy like Janard Avery. I think he has a shot here.
Yep, I would agree with you. Then the last player, and that is Titus Leo, who was drafted last year for the Indianapolis Colts. I believe it was the 6th round, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Small school player, a lot of physical attributes to his game, but again, had one of those injuries to start the year and just never came back. So Titus Leo got stuck behind everyone else, just like half of the draft class last year. What do you expect here, man? What do we expect Titus Leo to compete here, or are we looking at a practice squad guy?
I'd probably say practice squad because he really didn't get a lot of like time because he got injured so early on in the preseason. They didn't really have a lot of time. But I mean, physically, Isaiah, he's definitely, I would say Titus Leo's definitely got all the ability. I mean, no doubt about it. But yeah, I would say for now, practice squad. But I mean, he's a kid that has some upside, some physical traits that you like. So I'm saying he's going to be in that competition, man. I think he could show out and show you some things. I do.
Yep, absolutely. Well, that is it, guys, for the defensive end breakdown. A lot of names there, a lot of fun to talk about, and we're going to have a lot of fun dissecting that group as well throughout camp. Let us know what practices you guys are going to. Let us know which of these guys you're keeping an eye out for. But thank you guys again so much for all the support. Greatly appreciated. And as always, guys, go Colts.